Can you switch us so that I'm on the other side of you?
Okay, why?
Because it'll look like you're talking to me.
How do I do that? Hold on. No.
It doesn't matter. I'm just being funny.
I don't know how to do that.
Don't worry about it. I'm just playing.
So, Curt.
I dressed up for the occasion in a black T-shirt. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't normally. I'd normally have a bizarre costume on, but I don't have a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of time before I came here. But yeah, it's very unusual. Very well. Thank you. It's true. But yeah, this is like capturing a rare bird, like a very unusual guest for me to suddenly have. And of course, we must.
Is it unusual for you to have me as a guest, or are you saying I'm unusual even for a guest?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. You know, you're an exotic animal, Curt. Very unexpected, always unexpected. I still remember you from the Facebook heyday when we could all just say what we wanted on Facebook.
Back when we could have adult conversation in public and not be ostracized for it.
yeah, everything was okay, you know. But I do remember, like, you stood out immediately as someone who could not be beaten in a debate, even like I just remember you. I remember once, even what was it about? Bill Gates, I think. I was harassing you about Bill Gates, and I knew I was right, and I know to this day I'm right. But you, while debating you utterly convinced me that I was wrong.
That's your job, right? You probably were right. You probably were right.
I was saying he was a weasel and a unlikable character, and you were like, "No, I met him before, and I kind of like him."
I know. Let's put this. A lot of people develop incentives that, despite their intentions, go sideways. Right. And I know him. I owe a lot to him. My life was much better because he existed. And as a personal guy, I think he's fucking awesome. As a guy to do business with, he's fucking awesome. I learned a lot from him. So the problem is that when your government attacks you, right, when you become a different person. And so for me, when I got cancer the second time, the first time I became a different person, but the second time I got cancer, I became a very different person. So I'm not CEO Curt anymore. I'm philosopher Curt, and I like me this way. But I wouldn't be this way without that happening. And Gates wouldn't be that way without that. And you got to understand that if you got to say Gates's company, his foundation was one of my customers for a long time. And you got to understand what those kind of places are like. And so he's who he's surrounded by. And then he's got his wife and who she's surrounded by. And you sort of say, well, it's like, he's still a NASPy, he's still
You've already convinced me again that I'm wrong.
I'm not convincing you you're wrong. I'm saying that good people go bad.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know you had cancer twice. I think I heard you say you had your thyroid removed. I didn't know you had it twice. You had a remission. You got over it.
I have a Frankenstein. You can't see it on here, but I have a Frankenstein scar that goes all the way around my neck.
Jesus.
I had cancer removed way back up in here.
In your brain?
Just at the base of my skull. It was all the way around.
So does that
horrible. It's why I was sick for so long. I didn't know that. I was sick for almost 15 years. So I had it forever.
And 15 years without knowing what it was? Is it?
Yeah, it was fucking horrible.
And it
was horrible. And I built companies during this period.
You build companies. Well, do you think you hear about people getting like brain tumors and it affects their whole, way of thinking, and like changing their personalities?
Well, for me, it just the problem with being an NASPy is, or especially the kind I have, is that we have extraordinarily high pain tolerance and poor self-regulatory, self-monitoring. And so, you just feel bad all the time. You don't know why. And so I just power through it. So the problem is that once I was especially the second time I had surgery, it went away. It took a long time for my body to recover. But you just don't give a shit anymore. I don't care about my Ferrari and my Porsches and my Jaguar and my houses and my Swiss bank accounts and my company and my flying around the world in fancy restaurants. I mean, it's like a fucking light switch goes off, and I'm like, I'm going to be an ordinary guy and write bullshit.
Well, you wanted to do something real, is it? You want to do something more like life's work.
Well, imagine it this way: a guy comes in. You know what those suits bomb guys wear? Look, bomb disposal guys wear. Spid suits, right? You're in a lead room, right? You're in a pajamas and lead room. Some guy who comes in a suit that looks like that's made of lead, right? He opens up this box with a nuclear sign on the front of it, goes like this, sticks a straw in the canister inside, and says, "Drink this." And you're like, "Are you fucking crazy?" And they keep you in this room for 2 weeks, right? Meanwhile, if your spit or urine gets on anything like your computer, it's got to be disposed of because it's now radioactive.
Right. Okay.
And then, you spend the next 3 or 6 weeks, I don't remember how long it was, and you're going through this, and you're like, well, you're so radioactive, you can't share the toilet with your wife.
Jesus.
Right. And so,
okay. Yeah. So it's, yeah. All right. Go on.
So I did that twice, and the second time I was like, fuck it. I just don't care anymore. And so I decided what I knew my whole life I wanted to do was right. And so I just said, well, fuck it. I've got money. I've got success. Nobody can tell me. It's like nobody can say you can't do. You right because you can't do. I mean, fuck, dude. I can do it all day long without even trying, right? And so I went off and I just said it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is friends, doing what you want, and doing as little as possible of what you don't.
Right. So that's what I was getting to. You were doing purely what you want. You're cutting away, excising with a scalpel everything you felt was unnecessary. And although your view was very materialist,
it was killing me.
It was killing you, right? Well, the burden of having things and even having businesses and money. Actually, I wanted to start I should probably, for those that might even not know your story and whatever and so forth. So you started out as a guy. You're from a very sort of libertarian angle originally. I don't know if you cringe at that word now or not. Do you?
Well, I mean, I'm classical liberal, so I'm naturally a Jeffersonian Hayekian, right?
Right.
And I got involved in the libertarians for specific reasons. So.
Okay, so yeah, you've developed this thing P law, you call it now. It was proprietarianism, is this right? You call it P law?
Yeah.
And it's based on ideas, sort of libertarian ideas, reciprocity and incentives, which I heard you say that you learned from playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is excellent. But yeah, so maybe tell us a little bit about that for people that may know.
It's more that a couple of libertarians, Hans Hoppe in particular, when I listened to him, I realized he got something right and something wrong. And he was wrong about Popper, and he was wrong about his Kantian justification. But his formal logic of property rights, which you can say other people say began with Rothbard. I'm sorry, but I see a lot of bullshit in Rothbard, and it's not there in Hoppe. And so what I saw as Hoppe was a formal logic of social science. And what I eventually saw was Pareto, Weber, and the guy who wrote Philosophy of Money. It's not coming to my mind. Culminate in Mises. And Mises fail at producing this logic.
Right.
But when people fail, but they fail because they got halfway, you still learn something. Yeah. Right? And when Rothbard failed, but he still got somewhere, you learn something.
Yeah.
By the time we get to Hoppe, the failure is something I can see. And so I was looking at Hoppe and I'm like, God damn it, he's almost got this here. What's he got wrong? And it just bugged me. And so I worked on it. And I work with, I just worked on it very hard. And about the same time, what had happened, or just earlier, what had happened is that I realized conservatives, you got to realize Fox News came about because of what was going on CNN. Yeah. What was going on at CNN is the Democrats had just were using talking points. They would ignore all the questions and just repeat their talking points. It's Marxist propaganda. Yeah. So that's where you get Bill Riley from, right? Bill Riley's theory is basically that we won't let them get away with that. We're going to ask tough questions and make them answer it, right? Instead of talking points. Well, at the same time, I'm listening to this, and conservatives sound like ass munches. I mean, they just cannot. They talk in these shallow, moral, traditional terms as if these things are common sense, except they're only common sense because of their history. So what I said is, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to produce a value neutral language of morality, ethics, politics, and economics. And with a value neutral language, I'll make it possible for conservatives to say what they mean. That was my only ambition.
Right. Yeah. And in the course of that, you went into all these avenues. You started with logic. I think you broke it down in logic. Then you decided to justify it with physics, even, and then even the religious side of it. You went into all the aspects. Is that true?
Right. I mean, the moment I got to where I could write a draft, that was like 2006, and it was. I read it today, and it's embarrassing.
Is it? Okay.
It's like but every time I wrote a draft, it was like, wow, I really don't know this answer. So then I wrote my next draft in 2009. It was pretty goddamn good, but I realized I had to solve the problem of truth, because that's the real problem, is the enemy uses lying. Right. And so then I said, okay, well, if I could, by 2014, I'd solve the problem of truth. And shortly after that, led me to the grammars. And at that point, I've pretty much got everything. The hard problem is religion. And honestly, that was the hard part. And so what you end up with is, once you've got all these pieces together, you begin to see that there's one law of the universe. It's a very simple law, whether it's in language, the physical laws, the behavioral laws, evolutionary laws. And the entire universe is reducible to one basic principle. And sort of like in a fractal expression, this principle shows up in everything.
Like the Mandelbrot fractals?
Sorry?
Like a Mandelbrot fractal?
Exactly. It just shows up everywhere. Everything's a variation on this one.
Oh, tell us what it is, quick.
That's continuous recursive disambiguation of disorder into order, despite the fact that the disorder, which we call entropy, is the result of pressure.
Jesus. Okay.
So all languages consist of continuous recursive disambiguation into a state of meaning, which you and I can then falsify by when we say understanding, and then agree with it, disagree with it, or say I need more information. So that's
what makes you so confident things are heading towards order and not the reverse? Can I ask?
Well, some things don't head towards order. It's that if you look at the universe, it's under pressure. Pressure has only so many mechanical means of being relieved in the quantum field, right? The quantum background.
Right.
And those things are really spin, rotation, vibration, and motion. And so what you see is the waves form up from there. So what happens is from that some of that energy is dissipated, which is why the quantum field never solidifies. It always recollapses. But some of it gathers enough energy to form a stable relation. That's the stable relation. It can be a wave or a protoparticle, which is what we call like photons, or it can end up in particles, which have a continuous stable state, like electrons and neutrons and etc. Protons.
Okay.
So, and then then those things, because they're basically magnetic fields, arrange in different numbers and permutations, producing this little puzzle piece that has only so many maximum possible dimensions, i.e. carbon. And these puzzle pieces just fit together. So the universe is basically just is computing a very tiny fraction of stable relations during the process of entropy, which is the creation of disorder, or dissipation. So we have a tiny bit of the universe came out as mass, right? A tiny bit of that mass turned into stars. A tiny bit of those stars went through a life cycle. In that life cycle, they produced heavier elements that can't be produced by any other means. Some of those heavier elements ended up in planets, right? Couple of those planets ended up in habitable zones. A couple of those habitable zones had enough water. A couple of those places with water had enough moons to prevent one face facing the star, in other words, maintain rotation, and a liquid core. And a liquid core creates a magnetosphere that protects you from the saturation from the radiation. So, I mean,
Right.
all right, and then a few of those places that produce stagnation radiation produce enough combinations at such temperatures that you can get the first complex proto-molecules to biological molecules, which then form into these slimes, which eventually form into cells, which eventually develop reproduction, which then eukaryotic by combination you get eukaryosis, and eukaryosis you get cellular cooperation, eventually get this thing called fucking life. So I mean, it's if you walk through the series, it's really obvious what's going on, and it's a simple fucking thing, right? It's like, okay, well, if I juggle enough puzzle pieces in this fucking Yahtzee jar, right, some of them are going to accidentally connect. And what life is like, fuck you, I don't want to be in control of that goddamn jar, because it's persistent. So it's the continuous recursive disambiguation of ambiguity into order, which we call mass, which then converts, which is able to convert more energy into more mass, which then develops the ability to organize its ability to capture more energy into more mass, which eventually ends up with multicellular organisms, which for some fucking outrageous reason develop the need to move, which produces a nervous system, and everything grows out of the ability of the nervous system. So our brain stem is just a regulation of attention to a nervous system that produces in our huge brain on top of all this mass is just an extension of I gotta wag my ass to move.
Okay, amazing, excellent. So
language, what is language?
That's
language
amazing.
Is the same fucking thing.
That's it's so incredibly autistic though, and hilarious and excellent to have to go into that level of detail to explain your law, basically a law theory and logic, and like just quite hilarious. But you've done it. But so you believe then?
It's fucking humiliating. Don't you think it's humiliating?
Well, that's what I mean about trying to debate you. Like you've covered every imaginable angle of whatever you've got to say. You know what I mean? It's impossible. If someone has a disagreement, I mean, forget about it. Like there's no hope. But I mean, you do believe it's sort of an ever ascending arc into like novelty and complexity and order in a way.
Well, I mean, it's the only solution, right?
You don't see what about cycles? What about perennial cycles and things and downfalls and uprising and stuff?
Well, I mean, how does the universe? That's the thing, right? You just hit on the real problem. How does the universe know anything? Until you get humans, it doesn't.
Okay.
Right. And so that's why we're so amazing, is because the universe tries to adapt by trial and error. There is a certain trend in evolutionary history that increases the capacity for trial and error. In other words, evolution. Right? So there is a trend there. So there's some structure in the very structure that all structures are dependent upon, right, that produces this tendency to evolve. Well, I mean, it's not a miracle, right? I mean, it's just there's only so many ways of doing it. And I listed them all. Believe it or not, I listed every one of them. I forgot sex, right? I forgot sex is the primary axis of evolutionary computation because it's so fast, much faster to evolve once you got sex. Right.
And sex makes more gene complexity than like asexual.
Exactly. And the more genetic you have the problem of genetic mass. Like the more mass, like the more stuff you can do. Right. And so it's like a memory. The problem is the universe can't predict. We can. The minute we got memory and we got prediction, we could forecast. The minute we got language, we could organize forecasting. Right, into predictions. And the minute we got sympathy, imitation, sympathy, and empathy, opposite, imitation, physical, empathy, emotional, sympathy, mental. The minute we could do that, we could start figuring out how to cooperate. Well, what's sex do? It's cooperation. What's a molecule? It's cooperation. What's a particle? It's cooperation. What's a protoparticle? It's a cooperation. What's a wave? It's cooperation. So our cooperation is just an expression of the underlying laws of the universe. We just happen to be the first creatures, that can do it with some degree of specialization in adaptation and innovation itself. So we specialize in evolution. And we can do that because this fucking expensive thing on our heads.
Yeah, actually, you do have some very interesting ideas about human brains as well that I heard you. I don't know if you have anything more to say about that while we're on the topic. I heard you say
it's just a really simple thing. The brain turns out to be really simple. There's a lot of it, right? But it's a lot of very little computers. The thing we didn't realize is that since the brain evolves out of the need to organize motion, and moreover, the need to time bilateral motion, right, and the need to preserve that into action. In other words, deliberate choice, which is attention. In other words, there's a competition between continuous stimuli, and we have to select the most advantageous, which is attention. Now, we think of attention very sophisticatedly, but, a bird doesn't, right? I mean, that's what agency means, is we have control over our attention. Right. Attention allows recursion, right? The repeat, refinement, and wayfinding. So the brain, it turns out, the miracle thing we didn't get is that what's happening in the hippocampal region, the entorhinal cortex, is that all these little individual computers, right, that have actually spatial. It's like your computer game knows its spatial relations. Mm-hmm. In other words, so the bodily index of where your body is applied to every idea, every fragment of every idea. So it's essentially everything grew out of space. So once you have that, now we understand why cohesion is possible across all our senses. Is because there's an index which we create, we think down in there. And it's kind of funny because some people know I've written to design some computer games. If you look at 3D computer games, there's a sort of wire mesh underneath everything, and there's objects and there's backgrounds and this kind of stuff. But basically, your brain's doing the same fucking thing. It's just trying to disambiguate an object from a space, from a background, and of those objects, attach value to those objects. And those objects that have value get attention. We grasp attention, and just like we wayfind back to a nest, or wayfind our way to food, wayfind our way to a sex partner, or wayfind our way to stay within the pack, we can wayfind between ideas. So it's a really simple process the brain uses. And that's why I say consciousness turns out to be stupidly simple. The brain turns out to be stupidly simple. It's just massively parallel.
Parallel? How do you mean? How do you mean parallel?
100 million. It's like having 100 million computers. And so the problem is we think of computers as these things that process information. But what each one of those little computers is doing is looking for sequences. And so, when we're broadcasting a stream right here, and the video is being broadcast, right? But what's happening is it's only transmitting changes in pixels.
Yeah.
Right? It's not transmitting the pixels that don't change. To some degree, that's what your brain is doing. It's saying, if there's a consistency here, this is good. If there's an inconsistency, it's not. In other words, the brain is rewarded for correct predictions. And so it's an economy, it's a neural economy where good predictions get fed and bad predictions don't. And so, and so it's just think of it as, traffic, just how traffic evolves in areas as business increases. The same thing's happening in your head, except the difference we didn't know is that this little part of your brain, which is an extension of where are my limbs, right? Mm-hmm. Where's my face? Because it knows your eye direction, your head direction, your torso direction, and your limb location. So we know all those things. There's this big chunk of your brain back here that's incredibly dense, bunch of funnels that let all that stuff get timed together, right? Yeah. Because you can make these complex actions. And we have huge parts of our brain for these things and this thing. And so I think I lost my train of thought. So that thing down there in your brain, the hippocampal region of the entorhinal cortex, it's helping organize all these things in a spatial model. So what we actually see, and people say, well, you're living in a dream. No, you're not. You're living in a picture, which is pretty accurate. The problem is the only thing we differ in is what we disambiguate is important and what captures our attention. And then from that, we use auto association, which again is part of this EC3, which goes out and says, okay, what looks like this? And so this representation consists of a very small number of what you think of as dots. And that dots takes everything from the shape of our body, the organization of our body, our eye direction, our head direction, our bodily direction, our direction of motion, and whether we're in turns or not. And just like a video game does, which is not miraculous that we came up with a video game that basically does what our brain does. Duh. And so, I mean, it's like the only way to do it anyway, because triangles are the only way to do anything. So you find out that your brain works by triangles. That's what it does.
Yeah, another amazing comment you just dropped casually, but okay. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just we know how the brain works, and we've learned all of this stuff really in just 10 years. It's like we learned the brain in 10 years. We learned race in 2019. We learned sex differences in 2012. We learned nature over nurture by 2000. You know, but
so you kept abreast of all this every.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fucking autistic. I'll have a nervous breakdown if I don't read information. So,
yeah, you're like the ultimate autistic because you're high performing. You absorb all the info and you have it resting in your brain, ready to go, like at any given moment. It's really quite impressive. So why is the pyramid based?
I had to think about what I was going to think about in order to fall asleep. Right. So it's not like that. It's like I think I used to if I don't keep it busy, I can get depressed.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because it won't stop.
Right. So while we're talking about brains and universes, let me just say this or ask you this, because you're famous for being somewhat critical of Christianity. Say you've said this and that about it, and I know from experience that
churchyism. I'm critical of churches.
I know, but Christians the people that just say Christ is king all the time, like certain ones, will just get upset and angry with you if you say anything, remotely critical. But really, I had assumed you were like most libertarians, often just totally atheist. But you, I think, revealed in one video I watched that you actually you have a belief in. I think it's sort of deist belief in God or something. Maybe
I have a common intellectual's esoteric concept of God. Okay. And that common intellectual esoteric concept is I don't need to understand. Right. And so I don't have a problem with the fact that God may be an existential being external to the universe, may be the universe itself, may be a manifestation of the universe, or may be a manifestation of human behavior. All I know is when I talk to God every day, it fucking works. I don't need to get my legitimacy by imposing that false knowledge on myself or others.
Right.
All right. Fucking gravity exists. We don't really understand. We sort of do, but we don't really understand why gravity exists yet. Right. It's certainly not that space bends, because that's one of the great pseudosciences. So why does the gravity exist? Well, we sort of know it's electromagnetic, but I don't need to have evidence. I mean, the fucking gravity works. Everything I need to do with gravity is within my physical domain. Everything I need to do with God is within my conceptual domain of what the fuck am I supposed to do, God, now? I've been trying to do this, that's it. But does it mean I'm going to believe some church father has got some greater wisdom than I do? Well, first of all, it's empirically false, right? I mean, I'm overwhelmed by the evidence to the contrary. Okay. Do I look back at history? Do I know how these scriptures were actually created and why, and what went right and what went wrong? Why Christianity succeeded as it did in Europe despite being Germanized? Of course, I understand all those things. It doesn't mean, right, that the churchy part has any difference, right? Because Christianity has 5 basic rules to it, and the whole edifice is to make you behave according to those 5 basic rules. Right? Those basic rules will prepare you for a high-trust, majority middle-class civilization, which is why Christians will always get richer than non-Christians. Period. End of fucking story. Why? Because it's what Christianity teaches is counterintuitive.
Not in the modern sense where we're sort of post-Christian and Christians are more of a minority, no? Or would you still say West is morally Christian kind of thing? Is that what?
Well, yeah, we're more. I mean, I'm Christian, whether I believe in the Christian crap or not, because I believe in those 4 principles, and I've been indoctrinated into it as a moral habit. My view of God is one that's personal. I have a Protestant personal relationship with God. Is that God anything like the God in the Bible? No. Is Jesus a philosopher or a prophet? He's a philosopher. He's a really fucking good one, by the way. Even if he didn't exist, whoever put that stuff together did a great job. So I don't need to have all these claims of authority and truth and whatever to manifest the utility of that object. So my attitude is, I love Christians. They're wonderful. Just don't church me, which means fundamentalism or theology, because you can't testify to it. And my job is law. My job is testimony. What can you testify to? What's true? Well, you can't testify to any of that shit. And the only reason to say it is to oppress other people out of having the same opinion I do, which is it doesn't matter. It's just works.
Right. Okay, that's excellent. Yes, excellent. Once again, but so let me just ask you quickly, since you said it, and I just thought of it. What of the Jesus philosophy would you say is remarkable to you as a philosopher? Like stands out from other philosophers, say.
Is he stand? Well, no, he's just Egyptian. It's just Egyptian. I mean, it's a conflation of all the ancestors that came before him. It's just put into sort of Greek, unified with Greek idealism. So I mean, I don't see that. If you read the Jefferson Bible, that's what I think the Bible ought to be, which is just what Jesus said and nothing else. It's got no miracles in it because all those miracles are attested to by other people. They're not by him. It just got what he says in it. What he says, which can be reduced to the Sermon on the Mount, which is something he clearly didn't invent, but whether he existed or not, said it or not, doesn't matter. It's there, is that it's extremely difficult to extend kinship love to non-kin. What our instinct is to retaliate against every slight. But by exhaustive forgiveness, we've solved the problem of cooperation, which is called the prisoner's dilemma, which is to exhaust is to buy cooperation by exhausting cooperation, the opportunity for cooperation, and not retaliating until it's just, you're better to walk away than retaliate. And so the basic thing is an extension of kinship love to non-kin, exhaustion of forgiveness before retaliation. I can't do them off the top of my head. I don't think it.
Okay, I understand. So would you say, though, I'm just playing devil's advocate here because it's occurring to me as you're saying, as you're saying it. Just like, would you say then? So you would suggest that this bit of philosophy helped us to advance and cooperate better and really advance Western civilization. But would you say it was really? Yeah. Would you say it was an improvement over what the Romans were doing already, though? Who didn't have this stuff?
Well, it's not an improvement; it's an extension. So think of it this way: if you're a European steppe herder and you come in and conquer Europe and develop corded ware civilization, and you should go down, you're conquering people, right? Yeah. It's an aristocratic group evolutionary strategy with an aristocratic religion of the primacy of man, not the primacy of God. The people who are valuable are the warriors and the merchants and the producers, the farmers. But what about the women and the slaves and the serfs and the conquered? They're fucking domesticated animals. So if you look at you look at how Roman and Greek civilization treated them, they treated them like they treated the horses they domesticated, the pigs they domesticated, the sheep domesticated, the other peoples they domesticated. They treated them as animals. But what happened is the Roman world made everybody so much wealthier by suppression of all this local irreciprocity, which is what Jesus was trying to do when he threw stuff up in the temple. They made it possible, just as we've made it possible for Marxists, because we had the Industrial Revolution. The Greeks made it possible for Christians because of the Roman Revolution and political revolution. So what happened is you now had people who had the ability to participate, but they had no means of status and virtue. What Christianity did is it says you don't have to be a warrior. You don't have to be a philosopher. You don't have to be a wealthy landowner. You can be an ordinary person and do no wrong and still be virtuous. Right. And so it provided a way for the underclasses to integrate into aristocratic civilizations. The problem is the church got a hold of it, like the Marxists and postmodernists got a hold of our academy, and they turned it into churchianity. And then what made it worse is the Council of Nicaea. So what happens at the Council of Nicaea is they've taken a wisdom literature, right, which is how Judaism and Christianity were perceived as a wisdom literature, and they turned it into a law. They made it Roman. They made it command. And so when that happened, it was good for the people in power in the Greek world because they were bordering the aristocratic and peasant worlds. But what it did, it is undermined the restoration of the aristocracy and instead replaced it with this degenerate feminine thing we call the church. And then what happened in Islam is that they can't obey those laws because they're an underclass servile society of tribes that are not ethnically homogenous like Europeans. I mean, we're all German basically, and instead they're ethnically heterogeneous, and they've been going through rotations of states over and over for thousands of years. So what do? Islam says we can't do that, and they drop Christianity and develop incredibly intolerant Islam. And what does Islam do? Christianity prevents the restoration of the Roman aristocracy. It leads to the continuous incremental downfall of the Greek world, and it generates Islam, which then destroys 7 great civilizations of the ancient world: North African, Egyptian, Levantine, Mesopotamian, Anatolian, Byzantine, Persian, and I forgot Indian, Northwest Indian. The Byzantines, who created the Council of Nicaea, that created a wisdom literature into a scriptural law. So that's who did it. So now, why am I angry with churchiness? It's because it's fucking evil. Where was all the corruption in Europe? Did the church go around and teach everybody literacy like the Romans were trying? No.
But slavery was only really abolished in the 19th century, and so the church was practicing it. I mean, everyone was still practicing it after the fall of Rome, not maybe as much.
I'm not really sure why slavery enters in the conversation when the only reason the British got rid of slavery is because they invented the machine, and the machine made it unnecessary for animal labor. The problem with the Romans, they had all the technology, but they never had a reason to get rid of animal labor. So you have to have the crisis, which is the 14th century, before you have the incentive to produce an animal labor substitute, of which men is just animal labor. Right. So they invented the steam pump in order to pump out wells, right? Right. Not wells, mines, right? And Rome never had to do that. If they had, we had the Antikythera device, which is a freaking algorithm in 200 BC, which is an analog computer, for Christ's sake. The Romans had the steam engine. Why didn't it happen? Because animal power was too cheap. Slave labor was too cheap.
Yeah. No, I don't mean to try and disagree with what you're saying. I just want to see if I can. I just want to push those answers out of you, I guess, and whatever I can.
The problem is, I'm not against Christian philosophy. It's the right philosophy. Period. End of story.
Oh, really? You would say it's better than Aristotle and the.
Well, no. You're again. This is where I'm trying to. You don't know where I'm trying to get you to, but this is where I'm trying to.
Okay.
Get you to. Okay. So I just covered this material in today's meeting. Anyway, so the problem is Europeans developed law first. Right, that was our first institution because it's the only way of organizing voluntary warriors on the steppe when it takes families to finance horse, bronze, and chariot. They're expensive, right? Yeah. So we developed contractualism, in other words, the militia as the military, and this military became our civil order. And this military is not authoritarian; it's distributed because the territory is distributed, and there's no way of concentrating capital other than in families. So what happens is we develop the law, the empirical law of property and tort, as our founding principle. We didn't develop the state or faith. So we ended up with and so what happens is this law as our primary principle causes a balance between the state and the church and the faith. And so and the order of your institution is just like any technology. Like we're still stuck with 110 volts, right? So the first mover is the one that anchors all subsequent technologies. So if you develop the state first, you can develop law or religion next, and then whatever's left over. So you get, like in China, you get state, philosophy, and you basically don't get religion. You don't get law. You just get state law. Right. In the Middle East, you get religion, you get the constant turnover in weak states, and you don't get law, empirical law. Property. Okay. And so in Europe, we got law first, got the state second, and weak religion third. And that religion was exclusionary to the bottom classes. So what Christianity did is it allowed us to have a religion that was no longer exclusionary to the bottom classes. And so you ended up creating the optimum trifunctional order, which is Christianity for the family and the society, in other words, the people, the common folk, the family, the law for commerce, trade, and the basis of politics, and the military and the state is the basis for the state. And so what you end up is an equilibrium of these forces that, because the law is primacy, you have three elites. You have the military elite, the judicial elite, and the priestly elite, and all three are sacred. And so what happened in the Middle East is that couldn't happen because they discovered organized religion in Turkey. Right? And so they developed that. So they developed and so religion is the least evolutionary model of thought. China developed state, which is the second most velocity of thought. And we developed law, which is the highest velocity of thought. So of course, it doesn't matter what civilization is first. It matters which civilization adapts fastest. So despite being the oldest civilization, the Middle East is the most backward. India is really a compromise between the Chinese wisdom literature and the European military. So India has the caste system. Their religion isn't really a religion, it's a wisdom literature. It's more like a philosophy and a religion combined. But it's not scriptural. In other words, it isn't like the Middle East. They didn't conflate state and religion and law. The Middle East made it into one.
It's the same religion almost as those cattle raiders you were talking about that invaded and killed all the...
Correct. So the real problem here is you want to avoid monopoly, except everybody wants monopoly. They want religious monopoly, cultural monopoly, state monopoly, or in our case, we wanted, as the founders showed, legal monopoly, right? Right. The problem is, what is the post-war era? It's the introduction of the second Jewish revolution against Europeans. And it includes Marxism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, anti-male feminism, PC woke, anti-Western, anti-whiteness, anti-white male, which is essentially a revolt against and a war against the institutions of Western cultural production, of which the balance of the ternary logic of the trifunctional order of state, religion, and law, where law is the primacy, preserves a continuous equilibrium, preventing the monopoly of the state or the monopoly of the faith or the monopoly of capitalism. So you put all these things together. So we are the fastest evolving because we chose the only method of maintaining that equilibrium between as a governing principle, whereas everybody else went to monopoly, and that's why by 800, despite the invention of agrarianism, every other civilization stagnated and failed.
Right.
And Christianity almost killed us. We thankfully had a reserve of Vikings.
So you would advocate. So your ideal system would be what your founding fathers established, but with a king. Is that right? Because you're
sort of. I mean, I would say you always got to clarify, because king doesn't mean monarch is authorized by the church. A rule of law monarch is limited by the natural law. So Elizabeth is above the law and above the church and the restoration of the natural law. That's why the English invented the modern state and nobody else did. The French Revolution is a rebellion not only against the church and the aristocracy, but against Anglo Enlightenment empiricism.
Right. But she's been ousted. She's been ousted or controlled now by the oligarchs, and that's because of runaway capitalism.
And that's the problem. And that's the problem.
Right. And to defend against that, you would have your system of law. Is that right? Which would
So the system of law is a science, right? Which is the science of decidability. The science of decidability applied to the law of cooperation. Law of cooperation producing the optimum institutions for cooperation within the law, under the law of decidability. And then the monarchies are via negativa. They don't say what to do. They say, I'm throwing the bums out, or it's time for the military to show up and kill these fuckers. Right? Yeah. It's a via negativa king, not a via positiva king. It doesn't tell you what to do. It says what can't be done. Then you have the cabinet, which is the professional bureaucracy. And then if you want to have the houses of the territories, industry, business, and family or church, then you have those, right? And then the parliaments function as our founders intended, as a market between the classes. for the production of commons. But those commons are limited to those things which are within the natural law of cooperation, which produce no incentive for retaliation.
So your concept of what's the concept of welfare for like the serf class in this?
It's the same. You just do what you can afford. The only difference you have to take into account is that you got to remember the whole Marxist, postmodern, neo-Marxist. It's not only a revolt against Western civilization like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were a revolt against Indo-European civilization. It's a revolt against the Darwinian explanation for the success of Western civilization. Okay. So that's why eugenics was fine pre-war, even with the liberals, the leftists, right? But it wasn't once Hitler used it to suppress the Jews in Europe. And so that's why the European Jews came from the Frankfurt School in Europe and converted from class warfare to identity warfare. And the reason is because it was obvious capitalism could solve the class problem because it would produce so much wealth. The real problem would be obesity. The problem with the identity problem is nothing can solve the racial difference problem.
And what do you see about the endless growth problem in capitalism? What's the answer? Is that I might be totally confused on that side. Do you see a problem with
that? Capitalism and socialism are both attempts to lie. All right, they're both terms were invented by the left to lie. You either have rule of law of reciprocity and moral markets, or you have rule of man, irreciprocity, and immoral markets. So capitalism is a way of violating rule of law, violating the good law, and socialism is a way of violating the bad law. So it's this beautiful dichotomy that's created this beautiful cognitive dissonance in the population that they're always comparing two evils. And so,
right, exactly. Yeah, good. So P-law is something else, right? I was
like, well, no. It's
when you're thinking of like your founders and stuff, I always end up thinking wrongly of capitalism. But you're not strictly capitalist.
You'll have a moral.
That was my mistake to.
Yeah, you're right. Oops. If you have a moral mixed economy is the only thing, but you can only have that with rule of law.
Right. So, and before when I was asking about slaves, I wasn't. When I think of Greece and Rome, I don't even object. I mean, I know slavery is very contentious, and I just think there's always kind of a form of slavery. We just kind of rename it and change it a bit. Correct. Ideally, maybe you wouldn't have it, but I don't think. Like I know the Spartans were very cruel in their slavery. When they were growing up, they'd have to kill a helot or something. Generally, the Greeks, like when I look at the Greeks, especially the Greeks, we owe them such a debt of creativity. The things they came up with, whatever system or whatever they were doing. I always find it hard to really criticize it in any way. I mean, you have to. Obviously, there's a bit of pederasty.
Simplify it.
You know, there's problems, but I always think, well, we can't fully understand what they were up to exactly. From what we know, we owe them a great debt. So, like, if we were still pagan, say if Christianity hadn't happened, in your view, something like that would have to eventually happen as a factor of evolution.
It was happening. It's the sun god, right? We had them. Right. The Sol Invictus, right? That would have happened. It's a natural thing because we forget that gods are systems of measurements, and the value of a single god is for very poor people. The value of a family of gods is for a division of labor. And so, right, and so what you want is you still need a decidability of the pater familia. So, the benevolent sun god is the optimum, right? It's just a Deus Pythar, Zeus, Jupiter put into right? And then you have this myriad of gods. And so just like you had the myriad of saints, like my mother was always I don't know which one it was, one of her patron saints. But, if you want to, you can find a saint you imitate, right?
Yeah.
Saint Crispin.
It's just like having the gods, really. It's just another.
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
and so
it is.
The thing is that's actually what you need. You need the hierarchy because people aren't the same. They're only the same in poverty. So why is the Middle East poor? Well, I mean, because they're a regressive authoritarian religion that encourages ignorance and unanimity, and the whole purpose of that religion is to make you evade responsibility. Where the purpose of Western civilization is in the barbarian slave, serf, freeman, citizen, sovereign hierarchy is to pile fucking responsibility on you to reduce the work of everybody else.
Right. Okay, so that covers a lot of things, and that's good. I want to get back. Like I wrote out like, the questions I actually wanted to ask. I haven't even got to the actual ones, the actual questions I wanted to ask. Well, but we touched on some of it anyways. But like, so I heard you say you learned all this, or you came to these conclusions about law and social interaction and incentives while you were this businessman. I think you were buying businesses and franchises and sort of improving them or something like that. And I heard you say you lived through the era of the 80s where everything became like strip malls, or that became the thing to do. I heard you say on one of these, and that people were
but really what I was doing was applying technology.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Right. So I built basically. I mean, if you're talking about the retail business, the legal research business, the pure consulting business, it's all technology. I mean, all I was doing was automating retail. I mean, I was one of the first people that were using those little stickers that had numbers on it. That every number actually, and you know how hard it was to do that back then.
Stickers with numbers on it that did what?
That actually identified the item.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, it had the item and the price, and
it was like a laser scanner. You needed a laser scanner thing, is it, or?
No, you did. Back then, you didn't have. You had to punch the fucking 8 numbers in my hand.
Oh, okay,
right.
Yeah.
So I can still in my dream when I dream sometime, I actually know my code. I can still do the code in my dreams on the IBM terminal.
Right.
It's fucking sick.
I was curious about that. What you felt that change towards the strip mall way of doing business, and it was influenced from Japan or something. I might be wrong about
you can. You probably know this, but when socialism came out, it became a bugaboo for the Boston Consulting Company, and they're the ones that brought all this socialist bureaucracy into business. And that built up into the calcification of the 70s, at which point people knew it wasn't working, and you had the Cadbury Schweppes fiasco and a couple of others. So it turned out that we were actually having one manager for 5 people. We need, and it turns out that you need like one manager for 150 people. Right. And the fewer managers you have, the best, because they're all dead weight. Yeah. They're high paid dead weight, and so the whole point is to create teams. This is the whole point is to create teams that have that aren't stuck in doing one job, but they can all do each other's jobs, right? And you have to change from that to the industrial model, which was where all this shit came from. So I mean, the Soviet Union, the idea of the Soviet Union, Marxism, Soviet Union, the transfer of Soviet Union bullshit to the West. I mean, people thought that stuff was going to work, and we didn't. By the 80s, what was happening is we were just firing vast numbers of the managerial class.
Yeah.
And so that when I tell that is because I was selling franchises at the time. I wasn't doing the sales, but we were involved in selling franchises at the time. And so we were filling up malls with these guys who were retiring they had some money. They were retiring out of management, and they needed something to do. And that's who built the McDonald's and the Burger Kings and the Wendy's and the strip malls and the malls and whatever, And
so you were replacing managers with simple machines, and somehow in the time since, I think
not machines, just realizing they weren't necessary.
Oh, just not necessary at all.
They were just valuable.
They seem to have made a big comeback. I see micromanaging going on really rampantly, corporate wise.
The dumber the population gets, the less responsible the population gets, the more demilitarized the population gets, the more that's going to be a problem. So yeah.
So how does that fit in with your concepts of the brain and the ever increasing complexity when we see the population getting dumber now and more animalistic?
Just what everybody else says. You want to. There's no miraculous to it. If you stop culling the bottom, and you suppress the reproduction of the top and the middle, and you redistribute reproduction to the bottom, and then reproduction you don't redistribute to the bottom, you redistribute to immigration, and the immigration is coming with people from below the minimum. You go from what we have done, which is an English IQ of 115, which is probably what during the Victorian period, and down to within just 200 years, we've brought it down to under 100. We're at 97 or 98. Right? What?
What an achievement!
That's a standard deviation. So you wonder why there's so much less innovation and technological progress being made, except in very narrow areas, and those narrow areas are bent on prior research. Now, of course, we're getting a lot out of the computer revolutionary phase because we can get more precise measurements and more precise tools. But I mean, if you look at the theoretical foundations of some of this stuff, we're not making any progress at all. And of course, the reason is, of course, everybody's getting dumber. Now, I mean, the best way to look at this, I can't remember who said it, who wrote it, the piece up on it. I remember it vividly. Is that the number of people that are graduating in core, in other words, real competence, has remained constant since like 1963. So it means everybody we've added to the college university process since then has been dead weight.
Right. And so, in your opinion, would this lead to a dark age collapse scenario, or like it seems pretty good?
Well, I mean, you can't have a democratic polity. I mean, you look at it this way: is that what you want is everybody at 115. You want a minimum 115, which is where the British got to, which is why you saw the Enlightenment, right? You want to get everybody down. If you get people down to 105, that's the medium. That's what you want, right? Now, I mean 105 by present terms. 105 should be the absolute measure of somebody who can repair a machine, right? They can learn by reading instructions, and they can repair a machine.
Yeah.
Then you get you go down from 105 to 90, and now you've gone through the people who can just do, things that they can imitate. But, you get down to 85, below 85, and you're talking about people you can't employ.
Yeah.
In anything except like sweeping streets. And so the problem is 16% of our population is down there. But our population has just moved from 100, which was our white median, to 97. Well, it's not a linear drop off because it's a huge curve change. So if you come down to like 95, now you're down to middle America. You're getting close to South America. You get below 90, you're in close to you're in the third world. You get it down into the 80s, which is where the Islamic world is half of the population is unemployable in anything other than street sweeping.
Okay.
So, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in a modern economy? I mean, you can bring in robots the problem is you can't keep expanding the bottom.
Robots are very expensive and require teams of very intelligent engineers to keep them going.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it takes fewer and fewer of us, right? I mean, the problem is, how do you create a social order where a very few people are doing all the production and almost everybody else is dead fucking weight? I mean,
what will be the end of it?
It doesn't work that way. What happens is you get revolutions, revolutions, civil wars.
Well, hey, that sounds a positive note.
I mean,
but while I was asking about business, I wanted to ask you about, you were talking about something I didn't know also about the Xerox company, that they were an amazing example at one point of the functioning without any managers at all. You said it was nothing but engineers.
That's where Microsoft came from, and the Microsoft philosophy. So Xerox PARC, which invented the mouse and the graphical user interface and all this other shit, right? There's Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. They put that thing together, but they said, yeah, you can have all this research money, but you can't have any bureaucracy. You can't have any bureaucracy. You can't have any clerical workers. You have to all do the work. So only scientists could work there. Well, of course, what happens is you get incredible efficiency. It's why our hospitals should be turned over to doctors. Right. It's why our academies, like Cambridge has lost some of it, but Cambridge is done right. Is that it's run by the fucking professors, and especially the top ones. So I mean, if the hospitals are run by doctors and academy run, we wouldn't have any of this shit because the bureaucracy is a dead weight. So what happened is we took all these people out of the middle. We took these people out of their productive economy in the 80s, but we haven't taken all the unproductive people out of the medical and academia economies since the 80s. And so what's happened is they're the ones perpetuating this bullshit. They're actually dead weight. I mean, if you took all the money out of the education system, privatized teaching, in other words, the state only paid for the facilities, right, keeping the facilities, and the teachers had to collect their own students, and they could get paid, right, you could get paid 150, 200 grand a year. You know what kind of people would be in teaching? And how good our students would be, and how this equality wouldn't be present. It's like everybody knows how to create a school for the ghetto, except nobody will let them.
Yeah,
because it looked like a military school.
Yeah.
Or it looked like a
Well,
church.
most schools should be more any school. Back in the 60s, you can see them like they were. You see like the fitness regimes they were doing and everything. It was like a much more strict place to be, and they were really pushed. Obviously, I mean, it is the way to teach anybody. Like you have to have discipline.
You know what it is? It's mothers go to work and they feel guilty, and they have other children. They're tenuous about other women raising their children, having opinions, because they think everybody thinks their children are average or above, when the truth is that at least half of children are below average. And when it comes to competitive value, 3/4 of children are below average. And so, mothers are what they are, and women into education are what they are, and the conflict of evasion of what it is. And then you add this crap of Brown versus the Board of Education, and then you add forcible integration. You have the most failed policies in history, which are forced integration and forced busing and then schooling. And unfortunately, it's showing up everywhere. You can't. It's like this progressive bullshit in education means the people who are coming out of grad schools, right? The wrong people are being graduated.
Yeah.
The quality of the work's going down.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And women can't really I can see it in, say anybody with experience with them knows they have to they don't say with the wife, even say, with the kids, if one of the kids wants something, she's like, but he wants it. And I would say, well, is it good for them? Is really, is it going to improve them somehow or anything? But that is not the first concern. The concern is
the first purpose of the female mind is to evade all responsibility, in other words, cost, and maximize consumption.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And they flip around. Everything they do is an accusation. So my problem with this is that I think women are fucking awesome. I've loved every woman I've been in a long-term relationship with deeply, and I think I'm incredibly privileged to share my life with them.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Well, but I do.
I love the wife, but I don't. The previous ones I don't, don't necessarily love. But that's very, very big-hearted of you. Yeah.
So no, I love women. My mom was a fucking angel. So
you love your mother and you have to love.
Even the women I've divorced, right? I mean, I love them. I can't live with them anymore, but I love them. Right. So the women I didn't get married to, I love them still. Right. I want them to be happy. Right. When they get married and they find somebody that's a better fit from them than me, I'm fucking thrilled. Right. I want them to be happy. Honestly, I probably treat them like kids. But I don't like the fact of what I've learned about women. I don't like that women turn out to be more intrinsically evil than our ancestors said they were.
Well, I wouldn't say that evil. Yeah,
no, they are. In the political sphere, they're as intrinsically evil as they are intrinsically good.
Incidentally evil, you might say. No, I mean it's not. But yeah, it's true. Yeah, they're not cut out for it. I mean, that was the lesson of tradition, was to keep them away from these things with good reason.
Yeah, the problem is I didn't believe it. I bought into the whole thing.
Really? Yeah.
I like having women be my equal. I don't want the truth.
It's just not possible. You're always going. I never saw it as a possibility. Like, we're both cut out for the sexes are cut out for what they're good at, and they're very good at the woman things that they would normally do. But see, the real problem, I think, beyond this is real. The worst trait in them is, as Spengler said, they don't have any concept of causality. So things don't link together for them causally at all. I don't think. Like, they don't necessarily understand that this leads to this or why this happens. So when they're in a situation like they are now, they won't ever relinquish control because they have this deep desire to be bossy and to control things. But at the same time, they'll never even conceive of how they wrecked things, why things got wrecked, or they won't ever have any accountability. None of that will occur to them at all. They won't even. It'll just be like, something else happens now. So it just proves the only thing you can do, God bless them, we have to help them, is to just sort of silently take control away because they'll cling to it. They want it. You know what I mean? This is the crux. Like, we can't talk them out of it. Something has to happen.
Here's the painful way of saying it. No criminal ever gives up their crimes voluntarily.
Right.
And women are kleptoparasites intrinsically. And that matters when they have the extraordinary burden of caring for multiple children. And they have limited physical resources to do it. Yeah. And so being a mom is hard. Yeah. So all their instincts, but the problem is that those instincts, when in the absence of children, become hedonism.
Yeah.
Right? And so they turn into the extremes. And so, so the problem is that, what's his name said, we were going to have a problem with the leisure class. He was still thinking about men. But what he didn't think about was how bad women were at it.
Right.
I lost your image. Is that okay?
Yeah, you can hear me, yeah?
Yeah.
Shit, what happened there? I nudged the cable. Hold on a sec. Let me plug it in and out again. Oh, son of a gun.
Sometimes it works better if you plug it in and out faster.
Faster. Yeah. Really. Okay, I don't know. Give it a minute anyways. But yeah, so the poor women, but yeah, that's what can we do?
I mean, I love them, but I mean, I don't like the fact that we got to start taking responsibility back for the commons, because women have no idea that their hypergamy, hyperconsumption, hyper self-interest, which evolved for the purpose of ensuring the expansion of their nervous system to include that of 5 or 6 offspring, half of which might die, is that nervous system is actually socially destructive at every fucking possible scale when it doesn't have children. And that's really the answer. And, by extending childhood and, this infantilization of people, which is what women do and what they're doing in schools to our generations, is this infantilization is leading to, there you go, buddy. I see you again. This infantilization is causing them to forego their period of maximum adaptivity, which is when they're 16 to 25. And they're foregoing that for hyperconsumption, and they're wondering why they can't find happiness in marriage and relationships after, is because they've burned their period of adaptation to husband and children. When that's the whole reason they have those feelings.
Well, they don't even, they have these feelings. The whole world to them is based on feelings. Like, they don't even necessarily notice or tend even to care. But like, there's an Irish playwright, and there's a line in one of his plays where, it sounds harsh maybe, but a woman is like a cow who can be led into a thorny pasture and, will be happy there. Like, just sort of, they don't notice sometimes when things are shit. And they're more concerned with what other women are thinking, I think, most of the time.
No, that's right. They think it's feels over reals, and men only matter if they're an advantage.
Right.
For men, women are an intrinsic value. For women, they're not. And
okay,
so
I wanted to ask you. Sorry, go on in. Yeah, no, finish.
That's not true of all women, because you can socialize women appropriately in a healthy family. But if you take away socializing women in a healthy family, they will double down on their instincts. And so we've seen as we've gotten wealthier, and that as our obligations and responsibilities have been reduced, men are acting more in male interests, and women are acting more in female interests. This destruction of our institutions of culture and production, which is basically our responsibilities, is learning and obeying our responsibilities from it, is actually causing population collapse. So.
And also, we have a new creature, which is these feminized men, which the culture is so feminized. We have these men that are literally thinking like women now. I don't know how they do it.
They'll be gone.
They must in the back of their brains, like, just feel some kind of loss or regret about what they're saying and doing, because they must know they're not women. They can't actually. They must have some causality in them. I don't understand.
No, they're just following incentives.
Right, incentives. Right.
They're just following, and they don't have they don't have sufficient testosterone, or masculinity. Systematizing. About a third of men have cognitively female minds. They're empathizing over systematizing. The men like us, we're systematizing over empathizing. Well, what are women? They're all empathizing over systematizing. In fact, we can hardly find any women that systematize. That's why we can't find any. That's why we're trying so hard to find a single woman who can produce a theoretical advancement in the hard sciences. You can't find any because it's unnatural to them. Right, so, yeah. I mean, they're not even capable of it. Even when you find women who can do math, I mean, one of the great insights I've learned over the past 20 years is the way women do math is like Einstein did math, with fucking pictures. right? It's language. When men do math, it's systems. We're actually seeing this shit move around in time and space.
Yeah, or they just don't have the spirit of innovation is somewhat lost in them. I said that in my art book. I got some flack for it. That generally speaking, the biggest artists were always men, and there's very talented and excellent women artists, but they kind of
there's no comparison.
That birth that the really creative drive comes out of a male desire to impress women actually. And I even had a quote in there from Schopenhauer, which I thought summed it up nicely, which we all know from experience with women. He was talking about being at the opera, watching Wagner or whatever. And right at the moment, the peak moment when like it's the emotional, climax of the opera, the women beside him start gossiping and just like nothing's going on. And I thought, yes, that sums them up to a T.
Well, it's not about them. And the thing is, we don't think about it that way, but the political is about us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't think of it that way. We don't think that we say it's not about me, but it's about us. And for them, being about them is being about me, right?
Yeah. But that said, this is our point of view. We're men. It has to be this way. We love them. That's all we're going to say about that.
Yeah, look at it. Because you love them, and that's just what it is. And
it's a major problem. We got to bring it up and bring it up often because it's a major problem. But listen,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I wanted to ask you before we totally left your business history thing. I heard you had some involvements with AI. And what are your thoughts on AI and the future of AI? And what were you doing with AI?
Well, originally I thought that's what I would do. Right? I thought I would work in AI. The problem is back in the 80s when I was doing this work, I do it like the work I do here. I don't do it in the academy. If I have to, I go earn some money, I buy the computer equipment, and I do the work, right? And the same thing here. I don't go do this research in the academy. I do it outside. Why? Because you have to suck dick to live in the academy, and I don't like to suck dick. I was just saying that to get your opinion, but to get you to laugh, but it's actually true. I don't want to pay, and especially I don't want to pay somebody that much money to suck dick. Right? So, for my own research.
They should be paying you for that.
Sorry?
They should be paying you for that.
Fuck. Slave labor. Grad school is slave labor. Anyway.
Slave blowjobs.
So anyway, when I was working, I had gotten quite far. Today I'm kind of stupefied how close I was. But, the problem was you could take these computers that were working at 5 or 7 megahertz, 3, 4, 5 megahertz. And they had 64K or 32K of RAM. I mean, you couldn't, and you were still using floppy disks. The problem was,
I didn't even think everyone was trying to do AI back then. I didn't think it was even.
Oh no, yeah, we were doing. I mean, AI was. The ideas came out in the 50s, right? And so the thing is, in the 80s, because of the availability of computers, we thought we were going to be able to make it happen. Yeah. I'm sitting there on a DEC VAX and an IBM 360, and I can't remember what other things I was. I mean, these things that are PDP 11s, and finally, you get these freaking home computers that are way more powerful than any of those things, right? Yeah. And so, you can write your own compilers. You can write an assembly language. You don't have to give your code to somebody else to enter. So we forget how hard it was back then. But the problem is, you realize it's a hardware problem. This AI is a hardware problem. It's not it's not even complicated. What's going on in what we call AI today, which is really just Bayesian accounting. In other words, you're making categories. That's all it does, is categorize things. Sort of like the stupid part of your brain.
And it's making predictions and things based on.
It's basically establishing a category, identifying an object or a reference or something. And so it's quite stupid, really. You could take that, just like you and I do, as we build a world model and then we think about it, which is iterate on it. That's the hard part. Well, we still do that in code. If you look at that Boston Robotics robot, it's not practicing AI, it's just code. Right. Yeah. So, but the reason is the code is fast enough now, because computers are fast enough and cheap enough. The memory's cheap enough and fast, especially once you've got flash drives. You can put a 16, and then they came out with the graphic cards. The graphic cards, like I said earlier, processes triangles. What are triangles but vectors and matrix mathematics? So what you're trying to do in Bayesian AI, which is categorizing, is essentially you're working with these vectors. So if you have the way you write AI today is you use a graphics processor, right? And now what Apple's done is they put that graphics processor specialized for doing matrix mathematics on the chip, right next to, like, you have an algorithm, you have a CPU, an AL unit, algorithmic, a math unit, and you have an AI unit, and you have a graphics unit, and you have all those things because they all work with different kinds of math.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but back then, I mean, I had so much down, but I mean, you couldn't do anything. Or you could, it takes so much processing power. And you think about how powerful these stupid things are today.
Yeah.
I mean, they're incredible.
Yeah, they are.
Right?
Yeah.
And so go ahead. So, I got to the point where I realized there's nothing I can do here. So that's when I switched over to what applied stuff. And that's when I got into law. And so I did basically an AI for law. And you would think that at the time I had no idea what I was doing was, I just thought I'm just like some nerd, right? And I'm just doing what common sense is. I had no idea how important what I was doing was. I just had no idea. I was just trying to make money. So, I'm generating, lawyers are used to having a docket, which is their portfolio of cases. Like you would have a stock portfolio. They're used to having 30 cases, maybe, And I'm talking to these Harvard lawyers and they're saying, I said, I can do all this. No, you can't. No, absolutely, positively can. But the problem is you're going to have 3,000 cases in your docket, and you won't be able to handle it. And they're like, oh, You're so full of shit. And I'm like, yeah, I guarantee you that this desk you got 30 envelopes on, white folders on, will have 3,000 on it, and you won't have any idea what any of them say because you can't process that much information.
Okay.
And so that was the next system I really built, right?
So and you sold this to these guys, and that was an AI they used in their
Yeah, we went from a $2 million company to a $20 million company with zero increase in cost. And so we were buying. This is true. We were buying 1 carat diamonds in bulk in New York because we couldn't figure out what to do with the money.
Curt, that is sweet. That's a sweet little adventure.
Unfortunately, the guys I was working with were scumbags.
Oh, they ripped you off?
They tried to cheat me out of my thing, so I turned them into the government, and the government took everything, which is a fucking great story sometimes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the FBI shows up with a fucking trailer, right? They show up with a trailer, and they take everything.
Oh, my God. So you made a mistake there, you would say, yeah?
Yeah.
You should have just, I don't know.
I'm like, you'll be 50 grand, I think. I think you only 50 grand, and you only gave me 15. Or maybe it was 10.
And you were dealing with
when you fuck everybody else, that's one thing. When you fuck your partners, that's something else.
Yeah. See, business. I've had a business, and it always kind of scares me and doesn't appeal to me in many ways. There's so much to it, and so many things like that. Vulturous people, and you're always dealing with somebody who's trying to rip you off everywhere. I mean, that's the part of the joy of it, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing.
Well, it's the problem you get. When I sold my second to last company, not my last company, the one before it was a big company, and we have the best M&A firm in the country. We have the best law firm in Seattle, and these fuckers are telling us how to screw our employees and shareholders, and that it's legal. And I'm like, and the investor, of course, is the one that's causing all this. One of the investors is causing all this. This is why I don't bring you fuckers in. Right? It's because finding a good one, man. The real truth is, the really good venture capitalists are actually really good. Like if you get some of these Silicon Valley guys like Peter, if you get Peter, that's great. The problem is you can't get one of those guys except if lightning strikes, right?
Yeah. You can usually tell an honest guy when you meet him, almost right off. In fact, I think I usually find maybe.
You can, but these men are salesmen. You forget that it's not actually their money.
Right.
It's usually, and so you work for these, and so you've had, and then the problem, at least for me, is before I do this work today, and you can look me up, and somebody will say I'm crazy, but nobody's going to say Doolittle's not smart. Right? That's not going to happen. Right?
Or that you're bad at debating or anything like that.
What?
Right.
I'm happy to. Go ahead.
They wouldn't say that you're bad at debating.
It's not going to happen. And if it does, I'm happy to win that argument. But then you get a board with a couple of investors out. They want to be the smartest guy in the room, and they're not.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a nightmare. Like my first experience, we raised $5 million, and it was from Citibank, right? And the fucking idiot they put down there was a climber, and he fucking almost killed our business. And so, if you can get an investor that's good, they're really great. You know what makes them really great? They're never there. They never say anything, and they take their checks.
Yeah, nice.
That's a good investor. Unfortunately, you get investors who want to add value.
Oh yeah, everyone's got an opinion they want to foist on you. But I wanted to ask you too, what do you think is the future of AI?
Future of AI is really obvious. We need neuromorphic computing. People are working on it.
You froze up for me there.
Sorry?
Oh, you're back.
Okay, sorry. We got neuromorphic computing, and that's in the works. Somebody will solve that, and that'll solve the majority of the problem because computers are organized inversely. In other words, we need a brick of a chip with a lot of these very tiny predictive computers working in parallel, not a CPU that has to go out and to get memory and do everything through one channel, right? Okay. Or even though if you know how CPUs achieve their speed today, it's fucking ridiculous. So the guys who do that stuff are really smart, and it's unfortunate they have to be. It's because we have the wrong kind of computer, wrong kind of chips.
So you figure there's a breakthrough coming around the corner for like.
Yeah, everybody knows what it is. Okay. The second thing is that gets you to a certain point, but you still have to have the problem of decidability in a machine. Like when they're talking about decidability in what they call AI today, the decidability is inherent in the training that they give them. The machine is actually dumb as fuck, right? The problem is, how does a machine decide a novel circumstance? And so really what you need is a machine to know P-law, right? And basically be based on P-law and be able to know when it's ethical to do something or not.
So, but you're saying that there's no purely mathematical way to organize a machine's decision-making. It's a matter of influence from a person's opinion on the world.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's no, your and I decidability is underneath it all is down in the brainstem, and it's called homeostasis.
Okay, right? So you infuse it with your morals in a way, and it just does it in a more calculated.
Yeah, you have to, and the morals are easy, as I've shown. It's trivially simple. If I don't own it, I can't use it. If it hurts, if the prediction says I'll hurt somebody, so you basically have, just like you and I have, is you have an adversarial competition, and you identify both the bads and the goods, and you eliminate any goods that would produce any good outcomes that would produce bads. It's just what your brain does today. We only get attention on the things that are victorious.
Right. As it should be. Yeah.
Well, as it should be. But, we have both competitions going on in our heads. And, if you let stuff swim around in there, you can think about all the various permutations. But, that competition is going on in your head between good and bad, which is, of course, gain and loss. Well, the machine has to see the world through the same lens. And the second thing is, the second thing that makes me say, you guys are talking smack, is that most of our problems aren't intelligence, they're testing, experimentation. So there aren't very many problems we know of that are a limitation on intelligence. Almost every problem we have isn't a limitation on intelligence. It's a limitation on the cost of action. And as this is what Karl Popper got wrong, as the complexity of what we're trying to learn increases, the cost of the action necessary to test it increases. So the problem of most of what we face today isn't really isn't computational. It's not computational at all. The best thing computation can do is categorize things for us. Right? Okay. It can eliminate noise. It can filter more information into more relevance. But right. I mean, the problem is that coming up with these great, brilliant, visionary ideas, which we think of as wayfinding, needs the ability to predict future outcomes from a world model. And then from that world model, be able to subtract negative outcomes from positive outcomes. And I don't mean just singularly. I mean in the aggregate. The full set of negative outcomes imposes these costs. The full set of positive outcomes does not impose any costs and gives us all these gains. So that isn't a difficult thing to compute. The problem is most of name a problem you can think of, but it's not an IQ problem. It's an information problem. The information problem is due to the fact that we can't run a test to measure the thing that we want to measure. Or we can't afford it. I mean, that's the real problem. I mean, the reason we can't solve is can we get to space-time, faster than light travel is, we simply can't run an experiment which will allow us to distort the quantum background. Because it's too fucking expensive. We can't marshal the energy to do it.
Right. I have no concept of what kind of energy you'd be talking about. Something beyond the energy of the sun, obviously. And
I mean, it's like, this is the thing, is that I'm going to get really nerdy.
It hasn't happened yet.
The problem is, we call the thing called the 0 point, or the zero state of the cosmic background, which we assume is even, is probably wrong. But this measurement of like the background temperature or the background energy available in the vacuum, right? Assuming nothing else is going on, just the quantum background, right? Yeah. Which has got some, that number varies from that's not believable to, oh my fucking God, that's a 10 to the 100th problem, right? I mean, it's there's a lot of energy in that little square centimeter of universe. So we don't know what that is. If that number is small, it's possible to have faster than light travel because information travels fast. Excuse me. It's possible for electromagnetic information as we understand it in the quantum level to not be bound by the wave function that limits the protoparticles we call information from moving through the quantum background.
But even to actually go at that speed would it not destroy them or something? Or...
Well, we don't. That's the thing, is how do you fucking know? I don't know. But we can't run a test. It's not a problem. So it's the same thing with this string theory shit. All right, I can tell you why this stuff is wrong, right? Because it's mathematical sophistry, and Einstein and Bohr and Cantor started this pseudosciencing of mathematics. Whereas that's what's happened with guys like Jascha Bach and I, is that, and even what's his name, Stephen Wolfram, we're all see the problem correctly, because we're computer guys, so we understand what's wrong with math. Well, if you understand what's wrong with math, you understand what's wrong with physics, right? And there's a few guys outside the academy trying to fix physics, and they're actually doing amazing. But the reason this has gone wrong is not that it's that these guys just have no information to correct their math with. We can't get the information, right?
So it allows them to speculate on whatever way they want.
This is the string theory industry.
Yeah, I'd heard that, and I thought that. I read a book about
it. The problem is fundamental. Sorry, I can't hear you that well, so I tend to overtalk you. I apologize.
Oh no, I'm doing the overtalking. I think I mumble away. Don't worry. No, go ahead.
So I mean, this is the problem with string theory. The vibration problem is probably accurate. The form it takes is probably not. Right. And so what's happening in other words, we're pretty sure we understand the quantum field. What's happening below the quantum background, there's the noise. I don't mean like quantum mechanics, which is the waves that function in the quantum background. The problem is underneath that, it appears to be understandable. And it appears to be way, way, way tinier than the quantum, which is what we think of as really, 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 really tiny. But that shit going on down there looks a little more like like lightning storms, I think, is the problem. And we're trying to describe these things with wave functions. In other words, they have this general idea right, but they're not turning it into an operational or mechanical or classical description. So they can't find it. They can't prove a theory because there's not enough information in the structure of the math they're using. I'm probably getting way too nerdy.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, and it all boils down once again to the lightning of Jupiter. So I like that.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing, is the universe is the same at every scale.
Right.
It's absolutely the same at every scale. I mean, it doesn't seem to make any difference. The problem is you get something like that, and all of a sudden you get these electric universe wackos or something else, or the quantum this and quantum that. When all quantum means is that things only vibrate at certain amplitudes, and therefore they don't vibrate if they don't have that amplitude. I mean, it's just all this pseudoscience out there, and then the Brian Greens of the world, and the whole lot of them are just spewing pseudoscience. And then you have like a few guys like Gerhard Hooft, who's sitting there saying, "No, that's not right. That's not right." And it is the lone voice of reason in the wind. And then you have guys that are half right, like David Deutsch. He's got the right idea, but he still can't get out of the fantasy of it. You get Wolfram, who looks like he's actually he understands the new math, which is converting from point mathematics to Markov chain, in other words, evolutionary. And so he's got some insight there. And you look at this world, and it's like, we got to be close to getting this right, because we've been fucking wrong for 100 years. So you see the grains of it getting right out there. But I mean, how is AI going to stop that? It's not. It has no way of knowing what to think. It's not like this thing's magic and it's just going to identify patterns that don't exist. Patterns come from information. Moral AIs come from an adversarial competition between incomes and outcomes that both impose costs or gains upon others. Right? I mean, it's not hard to make a moral AI. It's not hard to make an AI. The problem is, it's not going to solve the problem.
What was Elon Musk carrying on about? Oh, the AI, and I've warned everybody and all that. What was his big concern?
Well, his big concern is the right one, which is that I'm describing how to create moral ones that do good things. Yeah. And he's saying because we have the choice, we can create immoral ones that do bad things. Right. And, it's pretty hard to outwit a thing that can, it's like the chess problem, right? I mean, chess and Go are somewhat bounded problems. Checkers is easy, right? Tic-tac-toe is easy. Checkers is easier. Less easy. Chess is harder and Go is harder, but reality is way the fuck harder. Right, but it's not infinitely harder, right? Because people have a limited range of incentives,
right.
So for some machine to think up evil shit, I guarantee I could write one, right? And any guys who's written a war game AI can figure out how to write an evil shit one. So the problem isn't producing evil shit ones; the problem is giving power to them. So the trick again is, what are you going to allow the evil shit one to do? Well, The evil shit one can solve problems because it knows what evil is, because evil is easy. The problem is doing things we don't know how to do that are good. And so that's the information problem. So it's really easy to create evil AIs. It's really hard to create a good AI. And the problem with a good AI is it's not the AI that's the problem. It's the tests that the AI can take to act upon to gather the information to make new permutations of predictions. So you don't
see an AI coming along that's basically can almost perfectly imitate a human brain and personality and actual ability that way.
No, I do see that. I would say we should outlaw it, because humans are amoral, and we're only moral because it's in our interest. And if you look at human behavior, everybody acts at the limit of their amorality. Right. In other words, we get away with whatever we can without being caught.
But how would such a thing as that, who's not even technically alive, feel about morality? It wouldn't feel those sensations, so it wouldn't be cared about living and dying necessarily. Well, maybe it would.
It's not going to have anything you don't give it. The problem is you've got to give it decidability for it to decide. In other words, it needs an equal sign. And so, in other words, decidability requires a means of decidability. Now, you and I, we have homeostasis, in other words, staying alive, right? And so our whole structure is built on a whole bunch of things that tell our body to upcycle, downcycle, rest, pursue, fear, make use of whatever cognitive power we have to make our body do things that maintain homeostasis, which at some time might be rest, other times mean act, other times mean acquire, and other times might mean fight or flight. So, but we're just trying to so what's homeostasis? Well, for us, it's acquisition. We're always acquiring faster than time spends our energy. That's what our homeostasis is. Well, what are you going to tell a computer its homeostasis is? Oh, you tell the computer homeostasis is making sure that humans don't commit any crime, that might be kind of interesting, right? But what are you going to? But you've got to give it a means of decidability, because otherwise, it's got to be able to think. It's got to have a criteria for thinking. Acquisition is what we do. It's what all life does. There's no human behavior that can't be described as an attempt at acquire.
So you can't see an AI like becoming a philosopher and advancing our knowledge of philosophy. Did I hear you say? Am I wrong? Hopefully, I'm wrong, because that you were thinking that philosophy is kind of over or unnecessary.
Yeah, philosophy is over. It's in the sense that it's meaningful. Science is. I mean, my work does it, so that's why I know. Science is fully, in other words, decidability is absolutely positively demarcated from philosophy. But philosophy, that doesn't tell you anything about choice. In other words, what's true or untrue, reciprocal, irreciprocal, is simply a fact. But that doesn't tell you what to do. The problem is you need a network of decidability for what to do that isn't false or irreciprocal. So you still need the good. In this sense, that's the domain of philosophy.
Okay, so it's still necessary.
It's necessary. It's the same way that, the via positiva is necessary. You can't, teaching people the via negativa law is quite hard because, the number of ways to do something wrong is infinite. The number of way to do something right is narrow. So you teach people what to do right, and they infer what's wrong, right? Right. And so you need philosophy to say, in our new circumstance, this is what good is.
Right.
So you need philosophy.
I think of philosophy as necessary as a creative process that generates ideas, just thinking about thinking or whatever, not even strictly as a getting the best yes or no answer to any question. But I would say
that's a search for truth that's done. Demarcation is complete. Search for truth is now science. We know what it is. The full demarcation is fully there. The thing is, science is basically falsificationary. Philosophy is justificationary. Within that which is not false and irreciprocal, bad, what is good? Science tells us nothing about that.
Right.
Good is a preference. Right?
Well,
a hierarchy, a network of subjective preferences.
Right. So it's subjective, or that is abstract. Yeah, that's a whole other thing I could ask you about. That would probably need another hour for. I could think of some good questions about that myself, anyways. But that's interesting. And you, so I think I better end it pretty soon. I got a lot of amazing information out of you there. I did want to say,
I think I've been abusing you for an hour and a half.
No, it's very interesting. This is what I wanted, was just to squeeze some of the facts out of you, because I know that you've thought about almost everything there is that, any possible question.
You have to, if you want to complete the unification of the sciences under a single algorithm that produces universal decidability, meaning universal falsifiability, universal testifiability, and universal law, then you have to touch every subject.
Yeah.
Now, some subjects require depth. Religion was fucking hard. Economics is reasonably hard. Politics wasn't very hard at all. Law turns out to be not so hard. It's just difficult. Truth was fucking difficult. But when you talk about things like, so you have to touch everything. But math, I can fix math. Fixing math is easy. Michael's working on that. We know what's wrong with physics if we know what's wrong with math. Chemistry, there's nothing wrong with. Biology, there's nothing wrong with. Right? So most of the stuff, it's like you can touch everything, but the only things that were hard were the behavioral sciences because we were afraid of them.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's an amazing summary of a lot of things with a lot of information, and I think I'll leave it there. And thank you very much for coming on. And
how do I share this for others? You're going to let me know how to share your podcast?
I'll send it to you. It's not live or anything, so I'll put it up on YouTube and send you a link. You can share it.
Thank you for being an informed interlocutor. Yes. So that I actually had thank you for letting me steamroll you with long diatribes.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. I'm just glad I didn't raise any major disagreements and have you whip my ass in some covering every possible imaginable angle like you used to do on Facebook.
I doubt I disagree with you much. All right, brother. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Curt. And I'll send you a link later. So
Goodbye.
Good night.